All right. Well, wait, shit. How do we start?
It hasn't even been that long.
I know. Hi, and welcome to another episode of a documentary podcast. I'm Josh.
And I'm Catherine.
And today we have a special episode. It's a short one, but we wanted to get it out there. We are talking about the film The Devil and Daniel Johnston.
My name is Daniel Johnston. This is the name of my tape. It's Hi, How Are You? And I was having a nervous breakdown when I recorded it.
Try to remember, but my feelings can't know.
He was a skinny little kid, fairly demented, and he said, I just want to give you my tape. And I put it on the tape player, and it just blew my mind.
There's really nothing to even compare it to. It goes way beyond Dylan's basement recordings, any other body of work that I can think of.
You start off hearing this noise, then eventually you hear the Beatles. You hear the whole symphony.
But it was undeniable that something was dreadfully wrong with him.
He was thin as a rail and losing weight.
Was completely delusional. He was hospitalized almost immediately. He was obsessed with the devil and Satan. He became so obsessed that it was all he could talk about.
This is Daniel Johnston speaking from a mental hospital. They tell me I'm crazy here. Out come the demons. Listen up and I'll tell a story about an artist growing old. Some would try for fame and glory, others aren't so bold.
So, that's what we're doing.
Yes.
Daniel Johnston just passed away this past week, and I have been a fan of his for a very, very long time, and this film is actually what introduced me to Daniel Johnston.
And I'll say, as a more of a newcomer, someone who's heard of him but hasn't delved into his work, this film, I would say, had a similar effect on me. That I was like, right after, I was like, I need to look at his art, listen to his music, see what he's made, because he's, I think, such a pure artist.
Absolutely. And I think that that's what's so beautiful about this film is, for me, I just think it captures it so well. But before we jump into it, I do have a film that I watched today that I wanted to suggest people because it kind of reminded me of a Daniel Johnston type. And it was on Kanopy, and it's called Will Work for Views. And it's this guy, he's been making these videos that are basically like vlogs and unboxing videos and all of these random like YouTube type videos, and he's been doing them since the 80s.
Oh, wow. So like before the YouTube generation.
Exactly. And now he has a YouTube, but he has been doing it since since the 80s. And it's kind of a similar story where, I mean, it's different in a lot of ways because I don't think that he has nearly the mental issues that Daniel Johnston had. And, you know, he's not on that level, but he's just one of these people that's so prolific and just making things. Like, he has thousands of videos. I think he has almost 1,000 videos like up on YouTube right now. And he's just one of those people that just like creates and creates and creates and just keeps doing things, and you know, maybe never built a huge audience, but it's just inspiring when these people just keep making things.
Sounds good.
Yeah, it was actually really good, and there's actually a scene where he's wearing a "Hi, how are you" shirt, like a Daniel Johnston shirt, and that
It's good now knowing where that came from
yeah, totally.
as an outsider.
Yeah, I remember seeing that shirt back in the day, and
Yeah.
and then whenever I saw that film, being like, oh, that's what that shirt is. Okay, so I guess that's all I really wanted to say about that. But do you have any recommendations that are along the same lines of this that were?
Not in the same sort of realm. So I'll say I'll maybe hold off on my recommendations till the next episode.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
I have a couple good ones for that as well.
Good.
So for this one, let's just jump right into the film. First, I'll just jump into talking about what the film is. So this film is called The Devil Daniel Johnston. It is a documentary about an artist and musician based out of Texas who in the 80s and early 90s just really built up a name for himself with like DIY, like making cassette, music, like making music in his garage on cassette tapes and just like getting out there and hustling and giving everybody his tape and becoming friends with everyone, and including like Richard Linklater, one of my favorite filmmakers' first movies. Daniel Johnston is actually in that movie. And again, he just passed away this last week, and there's a really beautiful little story Richard Linklater put up through the Austin Film Society that I really suggest everyone go look at.
What's it called? Do you know?
It's just about Daniel Johnston.
Okay.
And just like what a genuinely sweet, kind person he was, and like and Richard Linklater just reminiscing, like seeing this kid, and including him in his film and all that stuff. And talking about how if Daniel Johnston wasn't going through a lot of the stuff that he went through at the time that he made Slacker, that he probably would have been in Slacker. But there actually is a Daniel Johnston song in Slacker, but Daniel Johnston himself is not in that film. So, but yeah, so let's just jump into first impressions of the film.
Yeah.
I saw this film for the first time like when it came out.
Yeah.
Which is, I forget when.
2005.
Okay. Yeah. So
I have my notes.
Yeah, I saw this in probably like 2005, 2006. Somewhere in that time. I think I just rented it at a Blockbuster because I thought the artwork looked interesting.
And I'll say it was very interesting seeing it in the context of it, after him having passed, because one of the first lines in the film is an old videotape of himself saying, "I am the ghost of Daniel Johnston."
Yeah.
And it felt like watching it all the way through, it could almost be like a memorial for him in a sense, even though it was created while he was still alive. So it was just a weird feeling watching it, knowing that it almost seemed like it was inevitable, or like they were creating this in a way to sort of show his art and show it in a good way, in a positive light of what his life was like.
Yeah.
Like definitely the hardships, but like just an authentic look at his life, because that's may have been the only time to have done it.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's like one of the things that really struck me too, is like that part that you just mentioned. Like, even though I saw it for the first time 10 years ago, I've seen it, maybe like 4 or 5 times now. And it just takes on new meaning whenever the person passes.
Yeah.
And the beautiful thing about this film for me is like it really connected me with his songs, and you like at that time I was really into bands like Modest Mouse and Bright Eyes and like all of this like alt folk stuff, and whenever you listen to all of those bands, like early music, you hear so much of Daniel Johnston in that.
Oh, there were so many bands while listening to, or because they played his music throughout a lot of the film. I was like, oh my gosh, blah blah. Or this band has not ripped off, but it is very very influenced by his style.
Mm-hmm. If you go listen to the first couple Modest Mouse albums, like one time a Modest Mouse song came on and I thought it was Daniel Johnston for a second. And then I
Do
was
you
like,
know? Yeah.
and then I was like, oh wait, I think this is like the first Modest Mouse album.
Yeah. Do you know that it's sort of a newer band that like it doesn't exist, I think, anymore, but Youth Lagoon? His voice is like legitimately the same.
Yeah. Oh man, and I remember when I saw this 10 years, more than 10 years ago now, in 2006 probably. I remember just being blown away just by the sheer force that this guy was. And the music sometimes is like almost unlistenable. It's so bad. Like it's so terribly recorded, but something shines through it that like really connects you with it. And I think this film does a really good job of capturing that.
Yeah, and you can see how vulnerable he is in his art. Like there's no filter at all. So for me, I think what I really loved about the film was how they showed the relationship with his parents.
Yes.
Oftentimes in films like this, or in biopics, even though this isn't really a biopic, the parents don't play a really pivotal or like a positive role. And seeing how much they loved him and how hard they tried to get him through all his mental illness issues and situations that kept arising, and that they never gave up on him. That was just very touching to see. And at the end, it's just sad because they're like, we don't have much more time, because they know they have to be there to take care of him. And that just like broke me.
Yeah.
Watching.
And that really like, I'm not 100% sure, but I'm pretty sure his parents are still alive. And so I remember like hearing that and being like, oh, there must be some sign, like, it's kind of bad to say maybe, but like maybe there's some kind of like relief on their side, that like, that he doesn't have to like be on his own, I guess.
Or what they were saying is when he lived in the house with them towards the end of their life, that the best part of their day was when he was still asleep. Because they it was a full-time job. And the fact that, I hope it doesn't give away too much, but he purposely crashed a plane with his father in it, and that they still loved him. Like it's just such a story, I think, of like unconditional love. And most parents, I don't think, would be able to make it through that.
Yeah, and I remember they talked about how Daniel likes to go shopping all the time, and I actually saw Daniel Johnston play in Denver maybe in like 2008, 2009, something like that. And it was such a beautiful show. I just remember like he's in the middle of playing a song and he's like, oh, there's so many people here, there's more people than usual, or something like that. And just and everybody, like the vibe of that show just being so like loving, like everybody's just loving on this guy, but I remember seeing him before the show. He was in Independent Records right next to the Ogden, because he played at the Ogden, and he had somebody with him that he was just like stacking CDs in this guy's arms and just like buying a whole bunch of stuff. And I remember that's like one of the few times where I felt like, oh, it was like I saw somebody that I, love their music or whatever, and I just didn't say anything. I didn't say hi or great job or, good luck tonight or anything like that. And just being kind of like a little starstruck. But yeah, that brought back those memories whenever the dad was talking about how much he likes to go shopping or whatever. And so to kind of give people an overview of like what the film is about, it kind of starts out like talking about his beginning of his music and his childhood and like how he grew up and how his art started to come together. So he started drawing, and there's all these characters that appear in his artwork over the years. And then, he started playing music and recording his own songs on these like cassette tapes, and then making films with like an 8mm camera, which all that footage is so beautiful, and it's so fortunate that they had it for this film.
That was one of my favorite parts too, was that it was all original footage, and it's like his artwork was telling the story.
Yeah, and the animations of his artwork, and like, I know we talk a lot about certain styles of documentary, but sometimes whenever you do this style of documentary and you do it right, it's just so good. It comes together so well. Yeah.
I actually wrote that down, and I think it lends, like, this classic format of documentary works very well for art-related documentaries.
Oh, totally.
Because you can visually, like, just put the artwork up and have someone speak over it, and it just, like, seamlessly works because you're just letting the art speak for itself.
Yeah, and even whenever you go to the original footage that was shot, it looks so good.
Mm-hmm.
Like, whenever they're interviewing friends of his, you know, they don't always have them in the same, like, position. Sometimes they're standing up in their, you know, they're sitting in their kitchen. The parents are just sitting in their living room. And it all feels very intimate. Like, people are just talking while they're standing up in their doorway. And I thought that all of that stuff was done really, really well. And then there's some scenes where they're describing things, and they're describing the situation that happened, and instead of having like reenactments, they just have people talking about it while they're in the place that it happened.
Yeah.
Like whenever they're talking about the one lady who ended up being really scared by him and jumping out the window. You know, they're in that apartment, they're in the stairway, and they kind of show you, you know, how it would have felt to be in that place at the time, but they don't have any people in there like acting out the scenes. It's just like the place and the description. And I think that's like such a great, that's such a underutilized cinematic device. And
because it involves, I think, the viewer. Like, you have to then imagine and interact, and it becomes closer to you by doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. And then along the lines of like what we started out talking about with the, talking about like a lot of the things that now that he's died, like have such poignant meaning, you know? Some of his music, like he has a song about the funeral home, you know, like take me to the funeral home, and I'm forgetting the words to it, but just go look up funeral home song, or I'll play it right here.
Yeah.
Funeral home, going to the funeral home. Got me a coffin, shiny and black. I'm going to the funeral and I'm never coming back. Funeral home, going to the funeral home. Got me a coffin, shiny and black. I'm going to the funeral and I'm never coming back.
And so yeah, that just like hearing it now, it just seems so many things just have so much more meaning. And then this kind of plays into like with his decay. So he ended up being diagnosed with schizophrenia, and he started becoming obsessed with the devil, and whenever he wouldn't take his medication, he would like act out violently sometimes. And the movie doesn't really pull back punches. Like, people were genuinely scared of him when he was going through these episodes. Friends of his were horrified and like, you know, didn't know what to do. And it kind of shows like the desperation that a lot of these people that really loved him felt.
And even his family called the police on him.
Yeah, exactly. Because he ended up like pulling a knife on like some of his family members, saying that they were, you know, being possessed by the devil, and yeah, he just kind of ended up going after this kind of rise where his music was just starting to get popular. And there's kind of this theme of where he like it'll rise, and then like they even mention it in the film where like a bunch of really good stuff happens with his music and everything, and like the stress gets to him, and then he just has these like breaks, you know.
Well, it's interesting because before he was diagnosed with schizophrenia, they also said he was manic depressive.
Yeah. And
it's interesting to see how like his life almost like not just mentally, but his life mirrors that sort of wave as well, of like super high highs, super low lows, and it's just starts to become a pattern that he couldn't really keep up with.
Yeah, absolutely.
But still made art in the meantime, which is yeah.
And it's so interesting too because so much of his music was centered around these like almost such simple songs, that are so like poignant in a lot of ways. Like Devil Town, which I think they kind of end the film with, is just one of those songs that always stuck with me. And it's pretty like simple lyrics. Like I was living in a devil town. I didn't know it was a devil town. Boy, it really brings me down living in this devil town.
Yeah.
I was living in a devil town. Didn't know it was a devil town. Oh Lord, it really brings me down about the devil town. And all my friends were vampires. Didn't know they were vampires. Turns out I was a vampire myself in the devil town. I was living in a devil town. Didn't know it was a devil town. Oh Lord, it really brings me down about the devil town.
Just little things like that, and they have so much behind them that just feels like so raw, and I think that that's something that gets lost in art where everything is so overly produced, and that's what I love so much about like this kind of art that's just so like raw and maybe like technically terrible, but like conveys like so much honesty.
There is so much, you're saying, there is so much honesty and like just realness and sorry, so I can just say there. But yeah, like you're saying, so much honesty and realness, and I think because it's so simple, those emotions like are able to come out. And it was hard hearing, because I think it's similar about his songs as his drawings. One of the therapists was like, he has seen so much darkness, you can see it in his artwork. And the same, if you really listen to his songs, like they seem almost a bit like juvenile in a way, but like in a good way, like juvenile, but simple, but then with that underlying like really strong darkness that I think a lot of people sometimes feel but don't know how to like get out, and he does know how to like, I think, get that out.
Oh, absolutely. And it's funny because like I think there was a quote that said, I know Daniel's going to heaven because he's already been to hell. Yeah. But right after that, somebody like one of his friends is like, yeah, there's that, and then there's so much love and life and like goodness in him, and like so much like genuine, sweetness and happiness behind all that as well. And it's so funny because there's this part towards the end where there's a bunch of different photos, and it's like one photo of Daniel looking really serious and almost like kind of scary, and then another one of him like funny and like, and it keeps going back and forth between these like side-by-side photos of like him looking serious and smiling. And I think that that's like what his life is to a like on the extremes, but it's kind of like what all of our lives are, it's like we're never just one thing.
And it's always hard to know, like, is your happy or is your low the defining point of you? Like, which one is it? But like with him, as you can see, it's both, or like it's emergence of both. Yeah. So
some people mention that Daniel Johnston's music is like Bob Dylan, that it's better whenever other people do it. But I disagree. I don't know. I like Bob Dylan's music better when he does it, and I like...
Yeah. Well, I mean, you could listen to, like, for either artist, like, their music by them versus a different person, and it brings something else out. It depends on what you're looking for,
Yeah, and I want the sloppy vocals and the weird stuff, so...
and all the feelings.
Yeah, exactly. It kind of reminds me of, there's a Joan Baez cover of It Ain't Me, Babe. And man, the Bob Dylan version is like so snarky and mean. And I just love it. Like, cause it's just like, it ain't, you want someone who will die for you and more. Well, it ain't me, babe. And he's just like,
Yeah.
And then the Joan Baez one, she's like singing it all soft and emotional, and I was like, no, this is a snotty song. This isn't like this isn't a sad song. This is like a snotty fuck you song.
Yeah.
Oh man. Yeah, I don't know. Oh yeah, he broke his brother's rib. That's in my notes.
Oh, yeah.
He didn't pull a knife on him. He broke his rib.
But then the family was afraid to sleep at night because they thought that he was going to come kill them in the night.
And then there's a quote from like the mom or the dad. Or maybe it was I don't even remember which one it was. One of the family members. There was a quote where he's like, "We wept like he was dead." So they already felt like they kind of lost their family member whenever he was going through all that stuff.
But yeah, I still find it incredible how supportive they could be through like all of that. Like the fact that your son tried to kill you and you're still keeping him out of the hospital because that's what's best for him, doing your best to like raise him and keep a supportive environment. Like, I don't know I have incredible parents and like they've been tested, but like that's a whole other situation. Like I think he's very lucky to have the parents he has too. Or he had, yeah.
Yeah, there's a few other things I want to bring up too before we head out. 'Cause we're trying to keep this one shorter. But we're already at almost 25 minutes. So.
Oh boy, okay.
Yeah.
5 minutes.
So I wanted to bring up the story of Lori and how he like clung on to that story, which was like this girl that he was in love with, and it was an unrequited love. And one of the people in his life was saying that Daniel needed that unrequited love. He needed something to spark the creativity. And that's something I've really felt in myself too. Like I used to write poetry, I used to play music and all these things, and like kind of once things in my life got a little more settled, like it's harder for me to do that work. So I had to find something else that like inspired me, which fortunately for like nonfiction documentaries, it's just like people's stories. It's not about my own shit anymore, you know, like it's about like, you know, just the process of making films and, you know, doing this podcast is about like talking about films that affect me, you know, and et cetera, et cetera. And it's less about myself anymore. And I think that was something that like certain types of art need that kind of unrequited love. And like this like character that he created in his mind of Lori and like what she was, you know, there's that scene where he's just trying to get her to say, "I love you, Danny." And it's like, it seems like for most of us, that would be such a short, you know, period in your life and you'd get over it, you know, over the next couple years. But part of him like clung on to that story, I think, because he needed that for the creativity. Yeah. And I think that that's so interesting because I feel like it almost becomes like a myth at some point rather than actually being a thing.
Yeah. Well, I totally agree. I think he needed it. And you start, like with anything, sometimes it's nice having those what ifs because then you can live in it and like the actual functions are like reality can't get it, like infiltrate it. Like you can just sort of live in these moments, imagine what it would be like and create this like for him, create art based off of it. And no one can tell you no in that world because it's not real.
Exactly.
I've come this far and I know I can make it. I've got a broken heart and you can't break a broken heart. I come knocking at your door. You don't love me anymore, but I just can't give up, 'cause I don't know what to do about it. You must be wrong if you think you don't love me. You could smile down and put a happy ending to my song. I come knocking at your door. You don't live there anymore. Is it just a memory, or am I a little crazy for you? If there's no love, I just can't believe it. I Got a broken mind and only you can relieve it. I don't remember who you are. Are you someone that I saw? 'Cause I really am confused, but I think that I still love you.
Oh man. And then there was another thing I wrote down where they were the dad by the sign of the after the plane crashes.
Oh my god.
There's the sign outside the church and it said God promises a safe landing but not a calm voyage. I think it's interesting how religion, played such a role in his life, and even became like kind of the root. Well, not the root, but that became like the dominant narrative of his psychosis, And I think that would be true, you'll always find something that'll, perpetuate the stories in your head, but that became like such a focus.
Do you think that's though because his childhood, his parents were quite religious and he wasn't?
Yeah, I mean, I do
and
think so.
So it's like it's kind of a 180 in that. I don't know much about like the science behind what goes on in someone's brain when they start going into these episodes, but like I wonder if he's like reverting back to being. Okay.
All right.
Okay. I have no clue. So I'm wondering if he was like reverting back to being young, or like the young brain, and like that was a big part of his life and like was causing issues. So maybe he's in some ways working through that, or it's just taking over.
Yeah. One of the recurring things that happens in this film is like whenever you keep going down these roads, like the MTV appearance that he had, it kind of reminds me of, okay, this is going to get kind of cerebral for a second. Like, I don't mean to be like that guy, but there's a part, and it connects with Austin art, because there's a part at the beginning of Slacker, which is Richard Linklater's first, like, it's his second feature film technically, but it's like the first film he did with like a real, not a real budget, but, on a bigger level. Anyway, that's his breakout film. And it opens up with like this dream. Richard Linklater, his character, talking about this dream he had on a bus where he's like, every single like decision you make in your life, splits off into all these different possibilities where, maybe in this one you didn't get off the bus, and then it ends up turning into this like whole joke, but it's like, maybe if he would have just waited, he would be doing this thing, and then maybe he would have met this woman and like all this stuff, but instead he's sitting in this taxi. But in this other dimension, where he made the other decision, he could have like met this woman and they live happily ever after and like all this stuff. And he's like, oh shit, maybe I should have, stayed on the bus. And that kind of reminded me of like, it kind of made that connection with me with like Daniel Johnston's life and all of our lives really. But again, his is like in extremes because of what happened, but seeing him play at the MTV event, and if he would have signed with a specific record label over another one, then maybe his career would have gone differently. And maybe if he didn't have the break, like right after he played on MTV, his life would have gone differently in another way. And it kind of just reminds me of this, like, all these what ifs and all of these different, possibilities, and trying to come to accept like, that we don't have control over that.
I was going to say, I like your point, but I don't fully agree with it. And I like what you said at the end, that we don't have control.
Yeah.
Because I feel like with him, he made the most of every situation, and I think got the best out of it all, and was just such a go-getter. But because of his like mental illness, which was going to happen at any point, that's what I found heartbreaking about the film, is this was going to happen anyways. His career, the fact that he's still able to have somewhat of a career is incredible. But that this was his fate sort of all along, regardless of what he did.
And I guess that's what I mean by the joke in that film, is because like, Richard Linklater's character is talking about maybe this could happen in this and this and this. And then whenever it all comes down to it, he made the decision to get in that car, and that's where he is. And you just have to accept it and make the best out of that.
Okay. Then I do agree with you.
No, totally. And that was a long way to get to that point.
Yeah.
But like, there were so many times in this film, like, oh man, if only. And then you kind of have to like pull back and be like, first of all, this is Daniel's life. Why am I feeling like this? And then it kind of like brings up my own, problems that I have with like overthinking every decision and every like thing that could have happened, and trying to remember to live in the present and just accept like the situation that you're in. And
because that's what he, I think, always did regardless, was like, this is what I want. I'm going to do it. I'm an artist. I'm going to make art. I don't care what anyone tells me.
Exactly.
And like, just would do that.
Yeah. And look, I mean, later on down the road, he has like, 100 drawings on fucking notebook paper going to an art gallery, and it all sells out.
Yeah. Now his art is going to be valued even more, and he's going to be appreciated even more. Like, I don't think it's going to stop here.
Yeah. And that was the thing, is like, he could have gotten on MTV and maybe signed that other label, and like, sure, it could have like turned into like, being like more popular at the time. But in some ways, he really built like a legacy and a mythology.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this film does a great job of capturing that, even like...
Yeah.
And this is like one of the first documentaries I saw that I was like, it just felt like such a interesting film.
Yeah.
And I remember like seeing all that B-roll and being like, man, why can't other documentaries look this good? And like...
It's because he filmed it.
Yeah. Well, no, even the stuff that the filmmakers did with like the reenactments and stuff and the interviews,
Yeah.
Like, even all that stuff looks so good. And this film just has a real honesty about it. It doesn't pull punches about the negative stuff in Daniel's life and the bad stuff he did.
And it doesn't glorify, like, mental illness either.
Yeah, it shows, like, how devastating it is for the families and everything. And, like, because that could have been, that could have been another thing, too.
Because oftentimes it's like, oh, are you manic depressive? You should be an artist. Like, and they'll really play that. But it's like, no, this was not in any ways helpful to him being an artist.
Yeah. It was like he was an artist despite all that stuff, not like because of it per se.
Yeah.
And it just shows like the real toll it took on like his friends and family and all the people he affected through his life, But also leaving like a strong like story and mythology and so much art, like such a breadth of like songs and drawings and like films about him and like films inspired by him and all of these things. And I think that like, regardless of all of those what ifs I was feeling, like, that's a pretty great legacy to leave behind.
Yes. And I think for anyone looking, even if you know a lot about him, it's such a good film to like understand his life. Or if you don't know anything, it's a great introduction to sort of get into his artwork and what he was like truly about.
Totally. And this is how I heard about Daniel Johnston. I was familiar with the shirt. I'm pretty sure I heard a few other bands covering his songs. Like I heard Bright Eyes do Devil Town. And I'm sure I heard a few others, and I watched the Richard Linklater movies that I, heard him on, never really connecting. But when I finally saw this film, I became a fan,
Yeah.
And I feel really fortunate that I got to go see him in concert, because that was like one of my favorite concerts I've ever been to. So
cool.
Yeah, so I'm gonna give this go watch it. I think it's playing on Amazon Prime right now. Unfortunately, it has commercials on it. But...
Oh, I had to pay for it.
Oh, you did?
Because with my Prime, it was just like, it's only like $3 to rent. So that'll be my recommendation. It's worth the $3 at least.
I would say I have it on DVD actually too. So
yeah.
And...
But like you said, it creates instant fandom too. Like I'm like now want to go look more into him and like listen to his music tonight. Yeah.
Yeah. There was only like maybe like 10 documentaries I owned on DVD. Like now with digital and stuff, I've bought more. But back in the day, like I really never bought documentaries because I was like, well, I never really rewatched them. Really rewatched them. But this film I bought, and I remember I rented it first. I watched it, and I was like, man, that was really good. And I ended up ordering it on Amazon just because I was like, I'm going to want to watch this again. Yeah. And I don't regret that. So it's just a really good film altogether. And yeah, we'll leave this podcast off with some Daniel Johnston songs. So yeah.
Thanks for listening.
Yeah. You can find us on Instagram at A Documentary Podcast.
And our website at documentarypodcast.com.
And you can follow me on Instagram at Joshua LeBure.
And me at CMS Moments.
And we'll see you in a couple weeks. Oh wait, the music is usually by Timothy DeCans, but today is all Daniel Johnston. So go buy Daniel Johnston music.
Watch the film. Go
watch the movie. And listen to our next episode where we are talking about California.
Hollywood.
Yeah, Hollywood. LA Plays Itself and California Dreams. Bye.
Bye. Okay. Oh, I almost hung up. I was like, whoops, nope. Okay.
True love will find you in the end. You'll find out just who was your friend. Don't be sad, I know you will. But don't give up until true love will find you in the end. This is a promise with a catch. Only if you're looking can it find you. 'Cause true love is searching too. But how can it recognize you unless you step out into the light, the light? Don't be sad, I know you will. But don't give up until true love will find you